That. Well, hey, my name's Justin, and I'm one of the pastors here, and this is Trish, and she's one of the pastors here as well, and we happen to be married. And this week has been an eventful week because on Monday I was coming to Trish, I was talking about Hope is Here and how I'm excited to talk about connection and have everybody getting involved and connected in a group. And we were just bouncing ideas off of each other, and she said, well, why don't you say this, and how about this, and with this? And over the last few months, we've shifted some of the things that we're responsible for here at Hope City. And Trish oversees Cheryl now, who oversees our connection groups. And so she had all of these ideas, and I said, you know what, babe? You're just so eager to talk about this. Why don't you teach with me? And so you guys are in for a treat, 2 for the price of 1 today, all right? That is not, yeah, there we go, all right, yeah. So then it got even more interesting because on Thursday, Trish is like, hey, we're short on somebody leading worship today. And so she was up here leading worship as well. And so, woman of many talents, I'm not worthy, but I'm excited to be here with you guys. Hey, before we dive into the message, if you were not here last week, we kicked off this brand new series called Hope is Here. I want to encourage you to go back and watch the message. It really gives you the heart of Hope City. If you want to know who we are and what we're about as a church, that is the best way to kind of dive into our mission and what we're about and where we're going as an organization, as a church. So I want to encourage you to do that. But if you were not here, before we dive into this message, on your program that you were handed when you came in, there is a blue sticky note. I want you to take that note out. I want you to write your name on the note and what month and year you came to Hope City. As you came in today, you saw out in the lobby, we're attaching those to the wall just to kind of as an indication of how we're all a part of this community at different stages of development, different stages of time. And so we're going to do something special with those the last week of the series. And so if you could do that for us today as you leave, that would be awesome.
This past week, I was looking at the different names, and for those of you who are new to Hope City, Justin and I adopted our son and daughter, Jalen and Janiyah, 2 years ago. And so I was looking, and I saw little Janiyah's sticky note, 2017, and it just got me choked up. It's super special, but adopting them, I forget that I haven't had them their whole life. So I'm like, no, you've been here from the beginning, but they haven't. So one of our core values, the vision, the mission of Hope City is that we simply help people find hope and follow after God. That's our mission. That's our prayer for your friends, for your coworkers, for your family, is to help them find hope in Jesus and follow after God. And how we get strategic about that is what we call our 3C strategy. And I don't know about you, I'm dyslexic, so anything that has a rhythm to it, I'm like, yes, I sang my way through college. Just if I could remember stuff through song, I'm good. But the first C is celebrate. And celebrate is what we're doing right now. We come together on a Sunday morning experience, and we gather and we worship God together, and we celebrate who God is and what he is doing in our lives. The second C is that we connect. And this is what I'm most passionate about, and why I'm excited that I've somewhat hijacked Justin's message today, is that I'm passionate about connection groups. Because there is power that happens in community. And last, our third C is contribute. And this is where we give of our time, our resources, our gifts, our talents, all of it. We come together, and all with the purpose to help people find hope and follow after God. And today, we are going to be talking about connection, which is my favorite C.
Really the heart of connection is, from the very beginning of Hope City, is we said, hey, our goal isn't to gather people in rows. I mean, obviously that's important. But really the heart of the church is, and how we measure our success, is how well we can circle people up in homes. We believe that circles are better than rows. And my guess is, if you think about your life, you can probably remember a handful of sermons that you can remember from either your childhood or from adulthood, which is really encouraging for me as a communicator. But I bet you can remember specifically people that have invested in your life. You can probably remember significant relationships. My birthday was on Thursday, and I want to thank you all for blowing up my phone and my Facebook this last week. But one of the text messages I got was from my freshman high school basketball coach. He texted me out of the blue and just said, hey, happy birthday, thinking about you today. And there was not one person in high school that was more influential in my growth academically, spiritually, and emotionally than that person. And here, I don't even want to tell you how many years later, he's texting me, right? And that the relationships are significant. That's why circles are more important to us than rows. We want you to gather, we want you to celebrate. Sunday mornings are important, but we believe that life change takes place best in the context of connection groups and small groups. And here's the problem. Today in our society, we are more socially connected than ever before, and we're more relationally lonely. Right? We are more socially connected. We have never been more socially connected and yet so relationally lonely. And here's the deal. Loneliness does not depend on how many people are in the room. Did you know that the New York Times did a survey and they did an article on loneliness and what they called the epidemic of loneliness? And one of the things they stated in this article is that 60% of married people are lonely. Think about that. People that look for connection and think that they're going to be marrying into a relationship for the rest of their life, and more than half of people who are in a marriage relationship would classify themselves as lonely. 40% of adults in America would say that they are lonely people. So loneliness is not something that we just experience because we're alone. Loneliness isn't something that we experience just because there aren't people around. You can be in a crowd of people like this and you can feel desperately lonely. Loneliness is contagious in social networks. You know how I know that? As you scroll through your phone, as you scroll through Instagram, as you scroll through social media, there is a sense of missing out. There's a sense of, I don't have what someone else has. My life is not as good as someone else's life. And we experience what psychologists call social media loneliness. Researchers have actually found that the more time you spend on social media, the more relationally isolated you actually feel. Isn't that crazy? There's a New York Times article, as I mentioned, that called loneliness an epidemic of epic proportions. Former Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy was the first to call loneliness an epidemic. Murthy has shown that loneliness causes an insidious type of stress that leads to chronic inflammation, an increase of heart disease, arthritis, and diabetes. And let's look at this quote. He says this at the end of the article: loneliness has the same effect on mortality as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. You know why this is so important? Because you and I were created for relationships. We were created for connection. From the very beginning, from Genesis chapter 2, God says that we created, that there was community, there was Father, Son, and Holy Spirit that spoke this world into existence, that created everything that we're about. From the very beginning, we were created from relationships, and we were created for relationships. Genesis chapter 2 says, it's not good for man to be alone, right? And it wasn't just talking about creating a marriage partner. It was talking about creating a relational entity that would be able to be fully known and feel fully loved. That's been God's vision for your life and for my life since we were created. That there is a desperate need in each of our lives for relational connection. 65% of Christians say that they keep their struggles to themselves. 65% of Christians say they keep their struggles to themselves. And isolation is the greatest enemy to transformation. As we experience isolation in our lives, it removes the power of us experiencing life transformation. And for some of you, you know all about this. The more that you feel disconnected to God, what is your natural inclination? Is to retreat from people. Right? And so we have all of these surface level relationships, and we're unwilling to share our real struggles with people. And so we go to work every day and we say we're doing fine. We come to church every week, we say we're doing fine. We go to in our neighborhood, our cul-de-sacs, and we present the best versions of ourselves. And then we jump online and we present the most polished versions of our lives, and we feel isolated. And in that isolation, we don't experience transformation. You know what happens? We get discouraged and we think, well, why am I even trying? My relationship with God isn't working. So why am I even going through the motions of this? 21% of Christians, according to Ed Stetzer, who's the dean of students at Wheaton College, 21% of Christians say that they need to connect with others to grow in their relationship with Jesus. 21%. That means that 79% of church-going, God-loving, Christ-following people don't believe that they need other people in their lives to grow spiritually. And there's this epidemic of isolation, there's epidemic of loneliness, and it's just this self-perpetuating cycle. We feel lonely. We turn to things that we think are going to bring us fulfillment. They don't bring us fulfillment. We retreat further away from God, and then we retreat further away from people, and we wonder why our life doesn't change. There's a movement amongst Christianity, especially amongst millennials, and this attitude that says, you know what? I'm going to follow Jesus, but I don't really need the church, right? And we have a 23-year-old son, and as we talk to him, one of the greatest challenges of his generation is people who love God, but they have fallen out of love or they have completely been disenfranchised with the church, the capital C church. But as I look throughout the scriptures, here's what I see. I see that Jesus calls the church his bride. He says, I'm the bridegroom and the church is my bride. And he comes and he lays down his life for the church. And my guess is those of you that are married, you didn't get married because you fell in love with the institution of marriage, right? You got married because you fell in love with the person that you wanted to spend the rest of your life with. The institution of marriage was the covenant by which you live with that person. But it wasn't the institution of marriage that you fell in love with, and the church is the same way. The church is a living, breathing organism. It's something that Jesus came to establish. It's not some institution that we're a part of. It's a community that we're called to grow with. And so as we come here, we're not coming here just to receive information about God. There's a spiritual and a relational dynamic to your relationship with God. And when we try to follow Jesus in isolation, it robs us of the power and it robs us of the encouragement and the accountability that we need to see life transformation take place in our life. And here's the deal. God has always used human relationships to bring spiritual growth. He always has, all throughout history. If you look throughout the Old Testament and even into the New Testament, there was this time in the book of Exodus where the people of Israel were fighting a battle in the valley, and Moses is standing up on this mountain. And as long as Moses held his staff above his head, the people of Israel would win the battle. But anytime Moses began to lower his staff, they would start losing the battle. I don't know why, but that was just how it was. And the Bible talks about how exhausted Moses gets trying to hold this staff above his head. And then it paints this beautiful picture of Moses' two best friends coming next to him, Aaron and this other guy named Hur, H-U-R. I don't know why, that was his name, all right? And they sit two stones next to Moses. They put Moses on a stone in the middle, and they sit there and they hold Moses' arms up. See, God has always used human relationships to unleash spiritual power. Later on in the book of Exodus, Moses is trying to lead the nation of Israel. He's doing a really dysfunctional job with it. And God sends his father-in-law Jethro, who wasn't even a follower of God at the time, to say to Moses, hey, what are you doing? Why don't you delegate some of these things? So his father-in-law speaks truth into his life. There's Esther and Mordecai. There is Ruth and Naomi. There's Joshua and Moses. There's all of these pictures. There's Jesus and the disciples. All of these pictures all throughout the Bible of spiritual growth taking place in the context of relationships. And here's why this is so important. Because your faith and my faith is personal, but it's not private. Your faith is personal. It's a personal decision that you enter into with Jesus. But it's a decision that is made in the context of community. That we're created to experience life together. 56 times in the New Testament, there's a command that includes two words, one another. Be at peace with one another, honor one another, wash one another's feet, admonish one another, speak truth to one another, be devoted to one another. See, living in authentic community is something that God just assumes we will do. And if you study Jewish culture at all, this was deeply ingrained into the Jewish culture. But the more and more we get removed from that culture and the more Western culture we become a part of, the more we believe that we can do life on our own. And we rob ourselves of the deep, authentic community that we're created to experience. And then we think, well, church isn't really something that I need to go to because it's not really doing anything for me. When it's not only called to do something for you, you're called to be a part of doing something in the context of our community.
And so what's the implications for us today? If we know that the church is a gift by God for us to connect to him and to connect to one another, what does authentic community give us? And the first is that authentic community is an invitation to belong, right? It's a powerful thing to have someone invite you in. I mean, maybe you could think of a time maybe in middle school or maybe at your workplace or maybe into a family where you've been invited in. It's just like this special moment of being invited in. The reason that I know Jesus today is because my Aunt Kathy and my Uncle Joe, my Uncle Joe's family started going to this little Baptist church in the heart of the inner city of the city I grew up in. And so my Aunt Kathy invited my Aunt Debbie, and my Aunt Debbie invited my mom, who is her twin sister, and then my mom brought us to church. I mean, the power of an invitation, its implications can be life-changing. And what I love about the power of connection groups is connection groups begins simply with the invitation. When Justin and I got married, we got married like super young, went straight into ministry. And so we had a young, like 20-something group because we were 20-somethings, but we had kids and nobody else in our group had kids. And so we were living in Kokomo, Indiana at the time. And Justin was a youth pastor. And our kids were little, like Micah was 3. I think Isaiah or Elijah may have been born. I have 5 kids now. I don't really know their names anymore. But so Micah was 3, and he always, maybe you have toddlers right now, he never stayed in his room. Like we would put him to bed, and then he would escape. And I'm like, boy. And so when we had connection group at our house, our house was amazing. I loved our house then. It was this ranch house that we took the garage and we converted it into like a playroom / like media center. It was so amazing that it still had the
we didn't want it to
garage
lose
door
property
opener.
value, so we put up a faux wall and had the garage door tracks coming through the wall. And so we could take down the wall if we needed to have a garage, but It
was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So we're having connection group. Micah is supposed to be in bed, but he would get out of his bed and then he would go underneath the table and then he would just listen and watch our group as we were like chit-chatting and whatever we were doing. And so I would catch him and I'd be like, dude, go back to bed. And all of our friends would laugh because they don't have kids and they thought it was cute and it was not cute. And so by like the 5th time, I'm like, I'm coming unglued. And so Micah walks up. He's 3, mind you. He begins to pull his pants down.
I cannot believe you're telling this story.
I know. And I'll try to be appropriate because I am a pastor. And so he turns and he says to our whole group, Mommy, my ash hurts. Now, I pronounced it a little bit better than what he truly said. And what he was trying to say is a rash that he had been fighting, but clearly he said another word. And so I am sitting there stunned. And he says, Mom, and he repeats it again. And so I stand up and I said, he said rash. He said rash. Like we
didn't teach our kids to say the A word.
Yeah. Well, maybe. So it's like the power of an invitation. Last year, many of you guys remember Justin's sister had this really horrific accident where she had opened pool chemicals and they exploded in her face. She was lifelined to St. V's and was there for several weeks. And I have this weird thing about me is that when one of my family members is in the hospital, I cannot leave the hospital. It drives my family crazy. So I was not leaving my sister-in-law's side. But that meant my house and my children back home were like slowly deteriorating.
And when she says children, she means me too.
It was a little rough. And when I say my house was messy, it was messy, but it went from messy to being trashed. And unbeknownst to me, a family in our connection group decided they were going to surprise me and go clean our house. Well, what I didn't know is that our 2 80-pound dogs, a golden doodle and a labradoodle, had gotten into our trash, and literally our house was trashed out. There was trash everywhere. And so I don't know this. I don't know that they're cleaning underneath my carpets, underneath my couches. I mean, come on, somebody. Like, don't do that, right? You know. And so I'm leaving the hospital. Micah and Justin are with me. They get into Justin's truck, and Justin's like, I'm in trouble. And Micah's like, what's up, Dad? He's like, there are people cleaning the house right now, and Mom doesn't know.
I'm like, we have got to beat Mom home. And then I think through that, I'm like, you know what? If she knows that I know that there are people there and I don't tell her that people are there, this is going to be a bigger problem for me than it is for them. And so I throw my truck in reverse, I back up, I'm like, hey, we need to have a conversation. She's like, what? I said, the Lindemans are at our house right now cleaning. She says, cleaning what? I said, the house. She's like, oh my gosh, you're kidding me. I'm like, it's authentic community, baby. It's serving one another. Like this is biblical. This is what you stand for.
If you ever wondered if I was Hispanic, like I speak Spanglish, so I was getting really mad and I'm like, I know you didn't just have them come over. I'm going to come over there. And Micah's like, oh my gosh. But here's the deal. Authentic community is an invitation to belong exactly where you are and for who you are. Read what it says in Romans chapter 15, verse 7. It says, accept one another just as Christ accepted you. And then listen to what it says. It says, in order to bring praise to God. In other words, what he's saying is, listen, this community, it's going to be messy. This community is going to be hard. See, he's speaking to an audience that was both Jew and Gentile. And Jesus was of Jewish descent. But the problem is that Jesus just didn't die to save and bring restoration and bring reconciliation to the Jewish culture. It was for the Gentiles, which just meant a non-Jew. It was for everybody. And so there was a culture clash going on and even trying to find community under the umbrella of Christ. But when we engage in community, it's a holy experience. When we choose to engage and connect with one another on a soul level, when we extend the invitation to belong, what happens is that in that choosing to love, in that commitment to love, we reflect the love and the glory of Christ.
And one of the reasons that we say every week around here is that Hope City is a place where you can belong before you believe is because that's what Jesus lived out. Every place that Jesus went, he went to the marginalized, he went to the forgotten. And maybe you have been in a place where you haven't felt like you belong at church, like you haven't felt like you belong anywhere. You don't belong in your family, you don't belong at work, you don't belong at school, you don't belong in any friendships, you feel lonely and isolated. The church should be the last place where we exclude people. The church should be the most inclusive place on the on the face of the earth, because Jesus died for everyone. And we said this last week: a church for everyone makes room for anyone, right? And so that's an invitation to belong. Secondly, authentic community gives us an invitation to be real. Look what Galatians chapter 6, verse 2 says. It says, "Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you'll fulfill the law of Christ." There's this fear that we all live with. I know that I live with it. I bet you live with it too. And the fear is this: what if who I am isn't enough? What if who I am isn't enough for my boss? What if who I am isn't enough for my friends? What if who I am isn't enough by the people I value the most? What if I'm not lovable enough to find a husband or wife? What if I can't be the husband or wife that my spouse expects me to be? What if I fail to be the parent that my kids desperately need? What if who we are fully, the real us, isn't enough for the people in our life? I think all of us live with that insecurity. All of us live with that fear. And rather than fighting to be ourselves, what we learn to do is fake it until we make it. I spent 4 years out of ministry. In 2009, I started working as a recruiter. I was a headhunter, basically, placing commercial bankers in banks. I had never done anything other than ministry. And so you start out in this place called the bullpen until you bill a certain amount of dollars, and then you're able to move into an office. You have to earn office, and you can earn an office with a window, then you can earn a corner office. There's this, this reward system that they had. And so I was in the bullpen. I was what they called a rookie. And so until you billed $150,000, and you had to stay in this bullpen, and you got all of your calls were monitored. And you had the supervisor that just kind of walked up and down the thing. And I made basically 80 calls a day trying to find candidates to place in banks in Chicago primarily. So we got told no a lot. And I'd never done it before. And so after 3 or 4 days, they call it dialing for dollars. You're just calling people and calling people and calling people and calling people. And you get a lot of no's, you get a lot of voicemails. And I was getting discouraged because I wasn't used to failing like that. I was just really feeling down, really feeling discouraged. And the guy in front of me was very confident. He is on his way out of the bullpen. He'd been there for about 3 months longer than me. He had just billed $150,000. So at the end of that month, he was going to be moving into an office. And he looked back at me after one of the calls. He's like, "You have to be more confident than that." He's like, "I can hear the insecurity in your voice. You don't think that a guy making $200,000 is not going to be able to know that you don't know what you're talking about?" And I said, "Well, I don't know what I'm talking about, right? I've been a pastor for the last 10 years. I have no clue what I'm talking about. I'm saying words I don't even know the meaning to." You know what he said? He said, "Well, you just got to fake it until you make it. You just got to fake it." And sadly, I had spent the majority of my adult life perfecting that. I knew exactly how to fake it until I made it. And that's what we do. When we don't feel like we're enough, we don't fight through our insecurity. You know what we do? We fake it until we make it. We pretend to be more put together than we really are. We pretend to have a better marriage than we really do. We pretend to be in a better place spiritually than we actually are. We pretend to be closer to people and more fulfilled in our relationships than we actually are. We get really good at not being authentic and not being real, but being fake, because we think if I can just fake it, then someday I'll make it. But the more you fake it, the more further away from making it you actually are. And my guess is this: if you have become an expert in faking it spiritually and faking it emotionally and faking it relationally, you know what you probably are today? You're probably exhausted. you're probably tired. You're probably worn out. Because you're two different people. You might be three different people. You're somebody when you're with your spouse, you're somebody when you're at work, you're somebody else when you're out on Saturday night, and you're somebody else here. And there's this juggling act that you're going through relationally, there's this juggling act that you're going through spiritually. And what God is saying is this: you don't have to fake it. Not only can you belong, you can be real. You can be authentic. That's why I love this passage in Galatians. What Paul says is, hey, carry one another's burdens. You know what that assumes? It assumes that you're going to have burdens. It assumes that you're going to have baggage. It assumes that I am not going to be perfect. It assumes that I'm going to have things in my life that are not going well that I need you to carry for me. And there are things in your life that are not going well that you need me to come alongside and carry for you. And that we do not fulfill the law of Christ until we're willing to give up those burdens and until we're willing to share that baggage. And what we get expert and good at is hiding the baggage and hiding the burdens and pretend like the burdens are not there. And God is saying, hey, if you want to function holy and you want to function healthy and you want to have authentic relationships and you want your church community to be everything that I have called you to be as a community, then you need to create an environment where people's burdens are being carried by one another. Sarah, our creative director who did the announcements this morning, she posted a post on Instagram, I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before, of a group of people talking in the lobby of the church. And all four of these people are in a connection group together. And someone else from the church commented on that post and said, this is not my group, but these people came alongside me and brought me meals and loved me after my surgery and were a lifeline to me. That is the church being the church. That we can belong and we can have this sense that I don't have to fake it. I can be myself. I can be real.
See, authentic community is an invitation to belong. It's this invitation to be real. And when we choose to belong, when we choose to be real, what happens is it becomes an invitation to be healed, to find healing. And I just want to take kind of like a pastoral moment to do a couple things. One, to apologize as a church. You know, when you are a startup church, usually the squeaky wheel gets the most attention. And when we launched Hope City almost 3 years ago, we kind of came to a couple people we knew and we're like, hey, do you want to lead a small group of people? They're like, sure. And then 2 years later, we really haven't done anything. It hasn't been with the intentionality that it needs to have. And so what we realize is that you can invite someone to belong, you can invite someone to be real, but if you don't give them a clear path to find healing, it'll never happen. And so as a church, just like our vision is to help people find hope and follow after God, to be strategic, we have our 3 C's. And that's to celebrate, connect, and contribute. And I want to see that shift happen in our connection groups. And so we want to create 3 specific spaces. 3 specific spaces for you to feel like the invitation is extended, a place to be real, a place to belong. And the first is that we want you to be invited to belong to a connection group. And right now is like if you are in a connection group, you're in for life. Good luck, right? So what we're doing is we're going to be launching into semesters. And so if you're looking into being a connection group, the focus of connection group is community. And the hope is that as you grow in your community, you grow in your relationship as you serve at the church, and you grow in your relationship as you serve together and learn about God. And in that, there's a commitment. Our connection groups meet every week. That's the hope. And it begins in August and it ends in December. And why we want to choose to do what we are calling semesters is we want to give people a clear on-ramp and a clear off-ramp. Is maybe your connection group, they're crazy, y'all. And you're like, I got to get out of this group. You know, maybe you thought you wanted, an all married group, and then you realize, no, I need diversity. People in different generations, different stages of life. Our connection groups will start up again in January and then end in May. And then in the summer, you're going to decide if you're going to meet or if you're going to take a break. But we want to have a clear direction for you to get involved and engage. So the first is connection groups. A second is growth groups. And for some of you, the season of life is intense. The thought of doing something a whole semester, you're like, I can't do that, but you want to grow. There's a desire to grow, and growth groups do just that. Where connection group has the emphasis of relationships, growth groups has the emphasis of growing in your relationship with God. And so this past summer, I totally hijacked a connection group. It's been so fun. Cheryl and Ted's connection group, they are wild. I love them so much. And we began a journey that we would consider a growth group called Rooted. And Rooted is a 10-week study. What's awesome about it is you're just committing to 10 weeks, but if you know nothing about the Bible, it's an amazing growth study. If you know everything about the Bible, it is an amazing growth study. It's just another invitation for you to belong. And lastly, the third category is a recovery group. Many of you know our story, and when Justin and I, when our marriage fell apart and I was now working multiple jobs and we weren't even living together, I was not about that connection group life. Like I didn't even know what my life was. What I needed was a recovery group. And so Justin and I spent many weeks where he was in a recovery group for addiction. I was in a recovery group to just figure out our finances and how to figure out if I was going to live life as a single mom. The point is we don't want to have just an invitation for you to belong, an invitation to be real, but not have an invitation to heal. And so our hope and our prayers is we create these 3 different environments that you will find a place that the invitation makes sense. You will find a safe place where you can be real in hopes to find healing.
So let me give you just a few details about each of those groups. Connection groups are going to launch today, and we'll give you just some instructions in a few minutes on how you can sign up for a group, how you can meet some leaders, how you can be a part of that. Rooted is going to launch the first week of January and run for 10 weeks. So it'll run from January to March. Then from a recovery side and from a connection side, we're launching 2 things this fall that I'm really excited about. We're going to have a women's event here the second Friday of November. It's going to be just for Hope City ladies. We're going to have some special guest speakers. It's going to be our first women's event that we're really excited about. Trisha and a team of people are heading that up. It's going to be the second Friday of November. And then the Friday and Saturday before Thanksgiving, Trish and I are going to be leading a marriage conference here at Hope City. It'll be the first time we've done one in 3 years. I've gotten blasted from so many of you, like, hey, you go and do all these marriage conferences everywhere else. Why aren't you doing one here? Well, we're going to do one here, and it's going to be November 22nd and 23rd. And here's the cool thing about it. Every $1 of registration we're going to charge, I think it's going to be $59 for early bird registration per couple. Okay, not per person, but per couple. Every $1 of that registration money is going to be donated to the church. And so we have space in this room for about 150 couples. We're going to have some special guests that are going to join us. We have some special musical artists that we're inviting in as well. It's just going to be a phenomenal weekend. And so that's going to be the 22nd and 23rd of November. Thanksgiving is the last Thursday of November this year. And so that's going to be an awesome way for us to invest in marriages this fall. And so we're really pumped about that. Okay, so that's just for you guys to know. Lastly, an invitation to transform. One of the things that we said from day one here is that we're not interested in behavior modification. We want to pursue relentlessly heart transformation. And here's why many of us are predisposed just to settle for behavior modification. Behavior modification is clean. Like, be more patient, check. Be nicer, check. Come home on time, check. Be more patient with my spouse, check. Right? Like, there's things that we can just check off of our list, and we can monitor and we can control behavior modification. Hey, you're really losing your temper with the kids. Okay, I'll try better. Hey, you forgot to take out the trash again. Okay, I won't do that next week, right? Like, we focus on behavior modification because that means we can make the pain of our situation go away fast. But heart transformation is messy. Heart transformation takes time. Heart transformation is a process, and it's not clean. And so oftentimes what happens is we take 3 steps forward and we take 2 steps back, and then we feel like we're failing. We're like, oh, that's not working, right? And so in order for us to be invited into the process of transformation, we have to create environments where people can be real and they can be healed. And once you're in that environment, you feel safe to be yourself, that's when transformation begins to take place. Transformation always takes place in the context of relationships. And one of the things I encourage you guys to do every single week is invite people. Like, you're the greatest marketing machine that we have, right? We can put up billboards and we can send out mailers and we can do, Facebook ads, but you inviting people changes lives. You inviting people can change people's spiritual journey. Back in September of 2016, September 18th, we launched Hope City. And to do that, We had about 45 adults that were coming to Hope City at the time, and they were going to be our launch team. And so we signed everybody up basically to serve everywhere for the first couple of months. And then we sent out a 30,000-piece direct mail to a 5-mile radius of the Ritz Charles where we launched. And typically you get a 1% return. And so I think our first Sunday we had like 396 people show up, many of whom none of us knew. Right? And there were friends and family there and stuff to see, what the church was about. But it was this big thing. Well, there was a person who received the mail piece, and she invited her friend Kara to come to Hope City. And so I'm going to invite Kara to come out if she's here. So Kara comes to Hope City, and she brings her boys, and they come for the first Sunday. Well, then Kara not only brings her and her family the next week, somewhere in the process, Kara invites her mom, Julie, and her sister, Lindsay. And so they come to Hope City. And so they're coming for a while, and Lindsay is now married to a young man named Connor, but they were dating at the time, and Lindsay brings Connor to Hope City. So I'm going to have Connor come out. And then Connor gets really excited about Hope City, and he invites his brother Drew, and Drew brings his wife Jackie. And then Jackie gets really excited about Hope City, and so she invites her sister Jessica, who could not be here today. The fact that we have all these people here on one Sunday is amazing, right? But Jackie, who is not here, or Jessica, who's not here, invites her coworker Beth. And so Beth starts coming to Hope City. And what God has done through one person receiving a postcard in the mail, through this family, this is the power of transformation. And here's what I love. This family is integral to the heart of our church. You probably see these guys serving everywhere. In the nursery, First Impressions, the cafe. Connor was baptized here. Beth was baptized here. That's the power of belonging, the power of finding healing, and the power of inviting. And when you step into community, when you step into being real, it changes the lives of not just you, but the people around you. And God has entrusted us, not just with building the attendance of Hope City, but bringing hope to the city of Indianapolis. And you know what that happens? It does not happen always from a platform as I dispense or Tricia dispenses information about God. It happens as you are invited into community, and then you invite others into community with you. Can you guys give it up for this family just helping me with the message? Yes. So here's what I know to be true. This is messy. This is broken. And community in the church is community in the church, exactly, it is not perfect, but it's beautiful. And God uses people to bring redemption and healing to people's lives. God has always used people to grow people. That's what he does. Not just in the Bible, but now. And so here's what I want to do. I want to encourage you, take out your phone, search in the App Store. If you don't have the Hope City app, search Hope City Church Indianapolis. In the menu of that is every single connection group. If you hit connection groups on your phone, it'll take you to a website that has every single connection group that's offered. All the leaders, except I think for one group, are out in the lobby today. You can go out there and meet them. In your program this morning is a card. You can take that card off, fill it out, take it to Guest Central. Write down that you're interested in a connection group. Trish and I are launching a new connection group on Sunday nights for 20-somethings. We're really excited about that. We're looking back at our life and we're like, man, when we were in 20-something, we were with a couple of old people that really mentored us. I'm like, oh, we're the old people now. And so we're going to launch a 20-something group that we're excited about. We're staying in our connection group that's in Zionsville as well. And so we believe deeply in the power of community. And here's the deal. You're signing up for 4 months, September through December. Okay, it's not a lifelong contract. But maybe God wants to grow you in this season beyond your comfort zone. And that typically happens as we step out and we trust God to do something in our lives that we don't have the capacity to do, and that's transform. You can't transform a human heart, but God can within the power of community. So I want to encourage you, You can sign up in 3 ways: out in the lobby, on the app, at Guest Central. Okay, and take that card back there, and let's watch God take the brokenness of our community and make it beautiful as we grow together. All right, let's pray together.